again, history fans. I hope you are well. Today, we are going to be, or right now, we're going to be talking about our document discussion for this module. So we have 4 documents for this week. Statement of John Kerry of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I Have a Dream by MLK, the man. National Organization for Women, Statement of Purpose. And Indians of All Nations, Alcatraz Proclamation to the Great White Father and His People, which is the best title of all of 4 of them. So if you have those, get them out, get them up on your tab. We'll walk through them together. We're going to go in them in that order. So first, we're going to talk about John Kerry, one of our first topics for this week's lecture module was the Vietnam War. And we started talking about the anti-war movement and how the war is incredibly unpopular for a lot of reasons. John Kerry, first in our little intro there, tell me, who is John Kerry? So John Kerry is a Vietnam vet. He's a soldier. He's come back. But he also is important because of who he goes on to be. This guy becomes a senator. He becomes a presidential contender. He becomes a secretary of state more recently. He's part of the system, capital F. He's part of the State Department. He's in the highest echelons of power. So if anybody's going to support the military or the government, like, it's probably him. And he just flat out says, no, this is not good. This situation is bad for so many reasons. And he lists them all. So let's walk through it. Right there, first thing at the bat, he says, in our opinion, from our experience, our being the soldiers, the veterans, there is nothing in South Vietnam which could happen that realistically threatens the United States of America. Nothing. He left 0 room. He says nothing could happen in South Vietnam that could help the United States of America. There's no reason for America to be there. This isn't a war over territory or resources. This isn't helping America's natural interests in any way. Why are we there? Third paragraph. The given reason why America is there is to help halt the spread of communism. That's what the Cold War is all about, right? That's what the Vietnam proxy war is all about. This idea of capitalism versus communism, and capitalism is so much better. Third paragraph, he says, we found most people didn't even know the difference between communism and democracy. They just wanted to work in their rice paddies without helicopters burning them with napalm, right? They don't care. So why does the U.S. care? If the people who are living there don't know what the difference is between capitalism and communism, then why does somebody who lives halfway around the world and has nothing whatsoever to do with this country care? Maybe they shouldn't. So he says that this is on the first page. What I hope you pull out of this is that this is silly. This is pointless. This is a mistake. This is ridiculous. On the second page, on the back, at the top, he said, we rationalized destroying villages in order to save them. We saw America lose her sense of morality as she accepted very cruelly a My Lai and refused to give up the image of American soldiers who hand out chocolate bars and chewing gum. Americans like to think of American soldiers as helping and doing cute things like giving chewing gum to the kids. When in reality, they're shooting kids in the back. Remember our discussion of the My Lai massacre. They're burning homes and crops and completely destroying villages. They destroy villages in order to save them. My Lai's gone. No one can ever come back there, including communists. There's no communists there. So they saved the village of My Lai. Congratulations. John Kerry saying, no, 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 no. Towards the bottom of the second page, this is where he gets the most strident and where he starts really pointing fingers. He says, second to last paragraph, each day to facilitate the process by which the U.S. washes her hands of Vietnam, someone has to give up his life so that the U.S. doesn't have to admit something that the entire world already knows, that we can't say we've made a mistake. Someone has to die so that President Nixon won't be, and these are his words, the first president to lose a war. How do you ask a man to die for a mistake? How do you ask a man to die for a mistake? The whole world knows that the US has made a mistake. Nixon and his pride don't want to admit it. So they keep throwing draftees at Vietnam who don't come home. How do you ask a man to die for a mistake? You can't. It's immoral. So we talked in the lecture video about how when John Kerry and other Vietnam veterans start coming back and start joining the war effort, when they say things like this that are so strident and are pointing so many fingers like directly at the president, guts to John Kerry, right? He goes on, this speech is given on the floor of the Senate, and he's like saying that against the president. Wow, ouch. Solid brass ones. He when veterans come back and are so strident and so harsh against the government and the military and the president specifically, it's very convincing. The war had drug on for quite a long time. It was always an unpopular war. It only gets more and more unpopular as time goes on. And so eventually the ceasefire, this speech given in 1971, and we know the ceasefire in 1973, not too long after that. So well done, John Kerry. All right, our next discussion, our next document discussion, I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King. I'm going to keep it short because everybody has really strong feelings about MLK, including me. We could talk all semester about him. Bless him. And I did once. I had a whole class just about 1960s and his speeches. So it was cool. It was fun. Anyway, I digress. This particular speech given 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in Washington, D.C., at Washington. This is MLK's by far his most famous speech. A small note, like I kept all of the kind of crowd reactions in there, to which might, as you're reading it, make it kind of hard to get in the flow of the actual speech, and it's kind of obnoxious. But the reason I kept it in there is to try to get at the sense of how King and the crowd interact, like their interactions and their relationship, and they're always feeding off of each other. So keep that in mind as we go through here. They're always feeding off of each other. He's a Southern Baptist preacher, right? So he kind of has that rapport with crowds, and they have that rapport with him. So keep that in mind. In the first part of this speech, this is kind of a longer one. The first part of this speech is very formal. It's a pretty formal speech that he's standing up there reading. He has it prepared, and he's standing up there at the podium reading it. This is of course on YouTube. If you're interested, go watch it. Watch a few minutes at the beginning and then watch a few minutes at the end to kind of compare. The first part of the speech is very formal, and he's reading something prepared, and so the ideas in it are a little more structured. So one of those ideas went to fourth and fifth paragraph of the speech on the first page here. He's talking about this metaphor, this analogy of cashing a check. He said, in a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. This is the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, right? Jobs. They're advocating for jobs and equality in the workplace, and equal pay and equal hiring and firing and things like that, equal safety conditions. So cashing checks is kind of on their mind. So it's an appropriate metaphor. In a sense, he says, in a sense, we've come to our nation's capital, cash a check. And he has this metaphor that he carries throughout 2 paragraphs. This check was supposed to guarantee the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Instead of honoring the obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We demand the riches of freedom. He has this metaphor that he carries through several paragraphs of cashing a check. It is the first part of this speech is a little more formal. He has those ideas because cashing checks is on their mind. They're there marching for jobs and freedom within the workplace. But on the kind of towards the bottom and mostly on the top of the third page of this speech, you can, and as you're listening, you can kind of hear the shift too. There's a shift in this speech where he really just goes like that with the document that he has in front of him on the podium. Not literally, I'm joking, but metaphorically. He quits reading and he starts just talking off the cusp extemporaneously. And that is the part that really gets people going. And you can see that the speech that we have written out here is kind of interspersed more with the crowd's reactions and their words back to him, and they're getting all riled up. They're getting all riled up. That shift is where this speech gets its name, the I Have a Dream. On the third page, you can see several paragraphs where he starts out, I have a dream, I have a dream. He says on the first full paragraph of the third page, I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. This is it. This is where he shifts. This is where he metaphorically goes like this. I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. They're there for jobs and freedom. And so now he's shifting to that freedom idea. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up. Okay, he goes on and on. He starts all of these paragraphs with, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. He just nails it into the crowd's head. This is a dream. It is the American dream, but it is a realistic dream. It can happen. It hasn't happened yet, but it can happen. All of these are pretty well known, but by far the most famous line in this whole entire speech is the fourth dream. He says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's it. If you remember nothing else from this entire document, remember that sentence. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's all that the African American people are wanting out of the 1960s. And it is said very well and very eloquently by Martin Luther King in his dream speech. Well done, MLK. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. We should give him all his titles. He earned them. So, okay, our next document, National Organization for Women Statement of Purpose, the NOW Statement of Purpose. We talked about, no, I'm just kidding. Well, it doesn't matter. We'll talk about this one. We'll talk about them a little out of order. We talked about second wave feminism and how the first wave feminism was just about voting rights, wanting a right to vote in their government, and they'll deal with all of the other problems later. Now it's later. Now they're going to deal with all of the other problems. So the National Organization for Women started in 1966, still exists, founded by a lot of very prominent second wave feminists. Betty Friedan, the author of The Feminine Mystique, which we mentioned, Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American woman vice presidential candidate, not elected, but a candidate. She's there. She's present. That's awesome. Also by Gloria Steinem, who was an incredible journalist and editor of Ms. Magazine, which is also still in existence. So all of these really important women get together and form the National Organization for Women to try to tackle some of these issues that are facing American women. Second paragraph, they say it very succinctly. The purpose of NOW is to take action to bring women into full participation in the mainstream of American society now. Get it? Now, National Organization for Women. This is what they want, and they want it now. It's high time that they have full participation in American society. That's all they want. Full participation in American society. That's their main goal. What does that mean? They get to it on mostly the second page. So let's go to the second page. On the second page, you can see in kind of each paragraph, they talk about in each paragraph, they talk about a different issue and a different problem. The first paragraph is about jobs. And we might call this today the glass ceiling. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth line down, you can see to talk about how the overwhelming majority, 75%, a solid 30, or I'm sorry, a solid 3/4, are in routine clerical sales or factory jobs. They're in the lower echelons of power. They're in entry level jobs. They're cleaning women, hospital attendants. They're never the doctors. They're never the CEOs. So they have entry level jobs that don't get them a lot of pay. Our next problem in the latter half of the paragraph, they say, where is it? As a consequence, full-time working women workers today earn on average only 60%. I think in our lecture we pointed out now that's 82%. Well done, I guess. It's a lot better. Still not equal. They also point out that for women of color, that is even lower. So work, promotion, pay. They also talk about higher education. Higher education, increasingly essential in today's society. Us too. Too few women are entering and finishing college. We've kind of solved that problem. Well done. But at the time, women only earned 1 in 3 of the bachelor's and master's and only 1 in 10 of the PhDs. We saw on our slide, I don't think I dwelt on it too much, but we saw on our slide that that's still a thing. In all of the professions considered of importance to society, women are losing ground. Women are only 4% of lawyers, 7% of doctors, 1% of federal judges. Women are able to make decisions. Women are able to have a voice in higher echelons of power or influence. And therefore, when women are brought up before a judge or when they have to go into surgery, they never have someone like them in power. They never have someone who understands their problems in power over them. All of the authority figures don't understand their life, don't understand their problems because they're men and they can't always understand. Not necessarily through any fault of their own. They just can't understand. On the last page, they get on the last two paragraphs. Last paragraph, they get around to discussing men in the movement. I think that this is then and now a very common misconception about the feminist movement is what they believe in men. Feminists don't hate men. That's not the thing. That's misandry. Believing that men are better than women is misogyny. Believing that women are better than men is misandry. Believing that men and women are equal is feminism. That's what this is about. So in the last paragraph, they say that the role of men should be an active, self-respecting partnership. That's what they want. An active and self-respecting partnership. This is a relationship where they are on equal footing. They maybe have different roles, but they have complementary roles. A partnership with men. We don't hate men. We don't hate men. Men are cool. All right, last one. Yeah. Indians of all nations, the Alcatraz Proclamation of the Great White Father and his people. Super long, but cool title. The backstory here is that I think in our lecture video, we mentioned that a lot of the leadership, especially of the American Indian movement writ large, was college educated and urban, and a lot of them had gone to San Francisco. Well, in San Francisco, they had an Indian center, like a community center where people could go to have job bureaus and like they had potlatches and powwows there, you know, so pan-Indian culture, like powwows or potlatches or things like that. And unfortunately, in the 60s, that Indian center burnt down. It's gone. They need a new one. These people are smart. They know their history. There was a treaty, a famous, infamous treaty from South Dakota that gave the right to any unused federal land to American Indians. American Indians have the right to any unused federal land. And so here in San Francisco in the 60s, they say, hey, right there out in the bay is Alcatraz, a former, now abandoned, federal prison, maximum security prison. Most famously, Al Capone was kept there, right? It's just a rocky island. They literally call it the Rock because it's so rocky. It's a rocky island out in the middle of San Francisco Bay there, Alcatraz. And they say, that's unused federal land. Let's go take it as a publicity stunt. And so they do. And so it's a really big publicity stunt. And they put out this proclamation to the Great White Father and his people. Two things to pull out of this document. The first page just the sheer sarcasm. The sheer sarcasm of this document is amazing, capital letters. They say, we, the Native American, in the fourth paragraph, we, the Native Americans, reclaim the land known as Alcatraz Island in the name of all American Indians by right of discovery. What does that make you think of? They're poking fun at Christopher Columbus here. Christopher Columbus and all the other Europeans come in and discover the new worlds that already has thriving civilizations on it. It's not been discovered at all, and they can't claim land that's already being lived on. So the sarcasm is pretty thick there. A couple of paragraphs down, they say, we will purchase said Alcatraz Island for $24 in glass beads and red cloth, a precedent set by the white man's purchase of a similar island about 300 years ago. And they move on and they say they're talking about Manhattan. Another old trade treaty infamously bought Manhattan Island for glass beads and red cloth. Manhattan, like, that's a pretty good buy. They didn't exactly pay fair market value for that, even then, you know, before it was Manhattan. Next paragraph, we give to the inhabitants of this island a portion of their land for their own, to be held in trust by the Bureau of Caucasian Affairs. They're making fun of the Bureau of Indian Affairs there and how they're supposed to be the BIA is supposed to be helping Native Americans take care of their land, but they really don't in a lot of ways that we won't go into. We're going to help them achieve our level of civilization and thus raise them and all their white brothers up from their savage and unhappy state. So again, poking fun at the idea that we've talked about it in this class, about how white Americans were so convinced that they were more civilized than supposedly savage and heathen American Indians, and they were going to try to civilize American Indians. Now American Indians are doing the same thing. So, okay, in all of these ways in this first page, I hope that we can see the sheer sarcasm, and it's being very wry and tongue-in-cheek, and it's saying, well, how does it feel? How does it feel, America? If the tables were turned, how would you like it? Practice a little bit of empathy. You're trying to point out the hypocrisy of the American federal government. The other thing, the second thing to pull out of this Alcatraz Proclamation is what they say about the reservations. So they're on the bottom of the first page and over the break to the second. They say, we feel that this so-called Alcatraz Island is more than suitable for an Indian reservation as determined by the white man's own standards. By this, we mean that this place resembles most Indian reservations in that, and it goes on to list them all. Basically, it's saying that reservations are crummy places. They're isolated. There's no running water. There's no sanitation. There's no minerals or farming or unemployment. You know, unemployment is high. There's no educational or healthcare facilities. So life is hard and life sucks. It's very crowded. And last but not least, number 10, most importantly, it's a prison. Alcatraz is a former federal prison. They say that reservations are like prisons. The life there is hard. People are very poor. They are purposefully kept poor so that they can't escape. When people are born on a reservation, they tend to die there. They're stuck. Especially in this era. They're stuck on those reservations. Escaping poverty is difficult. I think we all probably know that. So that's the thing those are the two things to pull out of the Alcatraz Proclamation, most importantly. One, the sheer sarcasm. They're trying to turn the tables, point out the hypocrisy of the American federal government. And then secondly, point out how terrible the reservation system is. In all of these ways, there's no running water or sanitation or farming or healthcare or education. There's no jobs. It's a prison. People are stuck and they can't escape. So, okay, during the 1960s, I hope that we can see by now there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of drama. People are agitating for a lot of different things. It's a decade of cultural civil war. Remember, we said the 1960s is a decade of cultural civil war. We have people agitating against the war, trying to survive the war, trying to agitate for African American civil rights, American Indian civil rights, and feminism. So I hope that you got a lot out of these documents and can help put some more information into your notes to help you do well in your assignments. Don't work too hard. I'll see you guys later.